So I believe that all of you saw the presentation that Mette had yesterday. It was about various projects in Denmark for a city or for the city outskirts. So as a part of this workshop, we will see her presentation again, and we can go deeper in some of the issues. So really think about the questions you would like to ask her. This is a very unique opportunity that you have. And then we can discuss together and share the knowledge and share the experience we have. We can definitely exchange some informations, our thoughts. So you can already start sending us questions into the chat if you want to. Oh, welcome, Mette. I can see you. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. I'm sorry about the delay.
It's okay. No problems. Okay, so welcome back.
I moved to the library. Yeah.
Yeah, you have a beautiful background, I have to say. So, Mette, you can start with your presentation, and then we will follow up with the hopefully deeper discussion where we can exchange some thoughts with our participants from also other countries. So not only Czech Republic, but from also abroad. So please, if you can start.
Yes, I can start, definitely. Well, thank you again for the invitation. I tried to put in some insights and more into how we work as mainly landscape architects, but also as an interdisciplinary studio in many different locations, but also a wide span of scale of projects. So I tried to put to get you some insights in more on how we think. So the nature-based thinking and research and how it is to be a learning organization as such. What you see here is the whole ecosystem around a frog. That it's both about producers, consumers, and decomposers. So it's about the system thinking instead of structure thinking in the way we work. But also in regards to how you look at a city. A city is also a system, it's not a structure. It keeps adjusting and transforming to how we behave and what we consume and produce and decompose. normally nature's circuit is regarded as this circuit. So there's a generation, there's a maturing, there's an aging, and there's a collapse. Mm-hmm. But nature is much more, you could say, elaborated and agile in adjusting to the dynamics of weather, but also the soil condition, as I talked about yesterday. So it's a much more, you could say, system-regulated, but also an agile system that can adjust to certain contextual circumstances. And normally we also regard, when we work with housing, we regard people the same way. I mean, at least here in Copenhagen, in the Nordic countries, houses are built in the same, over the same scheme and the same program as this one. But the system of how we live is lately researched to up to 36 types of houses that we need, and how do we adjust and make housing and urban planning as such to the contemporary type of living and families. What we at SLA also always try in all our projects is not only to look at the nature, but also to conclude the three main circuits that we work with. So the water structure, the water management, the hydrological circuit, the biological circuit about nature and flora, fauna, but also the social circuit. So how can we make overlaps and interconnections between these three, because they all depend on each other in cities and in all our work, from a small pocket garden to a large urban planning, transforming an industrial area into a nice climate adapted neighborhood. We are also very specific about the planting strategy, both about what is the site conditions, but also what is it for a type of performance we need in the nature. How should it function, the nature-based design in our given projects? And then, of course, there's some kind of there's always like a design perspective on it as well. How should we create these series of spaces with both plants and trees? So that's how that's one of the matrix that we start with, or this matrix exactly is made for our Paris project. These are the type of species. So that's how we go about when we start the planning strategy and design on a specific project. And then we have a series of biologists, but also plant specialists. And to a certain extent, you can design on a desktop really, really far. But the added value of selecting the trees is something we do after the detailed design. So after the detailed design, there's a sum of money that is allocated for buying plants and grasses and trees. And then we go out with the client's permission, of course, but it's kind of, you could say, a prerequisite. It's a condition that we do in all our projects, that we go into the plant nurseries and then select the trees. And in that equation, after detailed design, we actually add a lot of extra value because we have a close cooperation with the plant nurseries, but also because we can find some trees in these plant nurseries that has a certain character that you cannot sort of order online. It's a little bit the analogy of buying something online. You cannot feel and touch it, but that you can do. That is what we do when we select the trees and the plants for the client. So actually, this is a project on a big headquarter outside of Copenhagen, Novo Nordisk. It's the strongest private economy in Denmark. And we did a headquarter for them where we transformed an industrial area for them, so a former production area, into the global headquarter. And here you see our plant specialist and our plant engineer actually making a specific, this is like after going to the plant nursery, selecting the trees, and then doing a physical model of the spatial design in the park. And on this site, we selected a series of mature trees. Mature trees is a little bit more expensive when you buy it, but not in the same extent as it's not linear with age, the price, but it has a certain effect, but it also has an extra added risk in transportation. And some of the trees actually didn't make it. They didn't make it. So we then convinced both the maintenance people of this site, but also of all Novo sites, that we should add in these trees into this new headquarter park. And there was some kind of abrasiveness towards that in the beginning, but then we convinced them that about the circuit of nature, that this would actually enhance the biodiversity. Nature is super smart. So the decay of one species is like the life and nurture of a series of other species in flora fauna. And this is one of the main entrances to the site, where we also included a white surface. And just by having a white surface instead of a dark surface, actually minimized the whole energy consumption on electricity for the lightning, not the lightning like thunder and lightning, but the light by 40%. And this is just to show you a matrix of a series of how we plant, how we go about, what's the kind of aging of over time, if you should like plant a forest or convert a farmland to a forest area. And so this is another way of starting a project. And this project is it's a research facility here in Copenhagen, where we are collecting all the rainwater from the neighboring sites. So it's not only on the specific site, but we're actually collecting. We're being generous. It's a generous water management system, and it's collected underneath the surface in a big tank, where it's filtered through a natural filter and then used for both irrigation or cooling down surface on a hot summer day on the urban space and the plants and trees there. But it's also used for grey water in the building. So, for example, toilet flushing and washing clothes and so forth. So it's pushing the agenda even further. So that's always how we always, with the client and with the end user, try to look at the added value and push the agenda a little further, step by step. And of course, it's not only about the specific technical light that allows you to bike during the dark hours, but it's also about cherishing and bringing forward the value of nature during dark hours. So it's about both how you sense and you measure. So we always talk about the amenity value and the utility value in all our projects. And this project you saw yesterday, the conversion of a housing street and a roundabout. And here, neighbors are using all. Before, this was a monofunctional space, more or less. It was infrastructure. But today, the roundabout is also a place where people meet. sometimes when I visit the site, there's always this old lady who has found her bench where she drinks her coffee and sits and watches the life and the neighborhood thriving. And a lot of shops, restaurants, and so forth. So that's about the social part of this circuit for this project. Yes. And this is again the hospital and this temporary parking area that was then a part of the greater solution. So sometimes you start small and then you scale smart, but you have to have the bigger picture before you do that in order to sort of make something not as a temporary part, something you put in and then you take it away, but something that you start with so people and clients and end users, people working here actually understand the value but also feel and sense the value of nature-based design solution in their closed environment. It's the best way to start a dialogue in a physical space, and I wish that all of you could come and see some of the projects in real time. That's always so much better than visuals. Oh, I already showed this one. One of the other, you could say, change in the way you normally practice as a landscape architect was to convince the users of the park that we should have like trees in the middle of these paths from A to Z or from one building to another. And that was in order to be present, so you don't like walk and you just like go a fast lane, carpool lane, all these fast accesses from A to B, but you actually have to sort of look where you walk and be careful of not going directly into a tree, and then being much more present. These paths, they also go up and down. And that is also part of nurturing a certain presence. And Novo Nordisk is dependent on making innovation every day in their work, and they have sort of changed. When we started the project, the innovation cubicles were like red perspex glass, where you almost, I would get electric hair like this. If I had to walk into a space like that, I would not be the least innovative. But now they're using the park for walk and talk, and they are cherishing and monitoring the biodiversity on this side. And this is just a palette of a series of our projects. And about the collaboration, and also how do you then ensure in an organization as we are, where we are 120 people, how do you ensure that some of the knowledge and the research and the learning on specific projects is distributed into 3 studios, but also into 130 people? But we have made sort of a research and development facility that is not so much about that they are doing all the research and development for more like thought leadership. How should we push the agenda even further for landscape architects and the role for landscape architects? But it's about sharing internally in the studio, but also sharing with our clients and our end users, but also our collaborators. And so our S-Lab is conducting and seeing to that these learnings are concluded in papers, but also are spread and developed even further in our projects and our team. And here you see some of the key findings, that the key elements and topics that we are working on. So it's about ecosystem services and biodiversity. It's about design by management. How do you management? How do you lower the cost of the management? But also how do we learn facility management? How to maintain and manage our design. It's about wind and microclimate, and so forward. And we have collected it in a series of knowledge papers. It's always, dynamic and agile and adjusted into, so it's up to date in order to push the agenda even further, and the bigger why of we are here. So we have these extracted sort of knowledge on a bigger level on how we work. And sometimes this is actually a door opener to new services, but also to new clients, new type of client. Yes, that was all for me. I'll stop sharing.
Okay, thank you very much once again. So I would like to open the discussion with a little bit of a theoretical question, but it's purely because our topic is green infrastructure. And I would like to ask you if you think that that term is appropriate, because you opened your presentation saying that you work with systems and not with structures. And the whole world is using this term green infrastructure. And I'm just curious about your thoughts about it, whether you think that the color green is enough and that the term infrastructure describes what this really is about.
Well, green is, from my point of view, green is just a color. Mm-hmm. So you can have like text in green, and you can have like screensavers in green. You can have like green shirts, and I mean, green is just a color. So for us, green infrastructure, it's okay. You can call it whatever, but it's more what is actually realized. So that's also why we never, or very rarely, we show drawings and renderings. We always show our physical realization, because that's where you really learn.
The reason why I'm asking is that we discuss a lot about communication, how to communicate not only our field, but what we do, because that communication ends up to be source of interest, money, and possibility to build. So, and that's the reason why I'm asking if the green infrastructure can actually communicate what we are trying to do.
I'll put it in another way. That depends on what it is that you're trying to do. If it's a door opener, then of course you can have like the overall umbrella, call it blue. I think you should add blue-green infrastructure, because the water and the nature is all connected. So it's not something you add on into a surface like a building. It's not an enclosed entity. It's something that is connected. It's a system, just as we people are, and our flow is in cities. So I would again say that if you have that topic and use blue-green infrastructure, it will always have to be connected with some certain cases. So how is it that you do it, and why is it that you do it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I definitely agree with that. I just want to open it with you like that. I'd like to ask our participants, what are your thoughts on this topic? Is there anyone who would like to speak? Please raise your hand so we can see you.
Is it possible for all of you to turn on your cameras? It's a little bit like only me and...
It is possible, but then we are afraid that the network will fall.
Okay.
So that's why we ask everyone to turn off and turn on only in case they would like to interact with us. And also we are not sure if they want to.
Okay. All right.
They can turn it on. Okay, so now I just got the direction from the technical team that you can turn on the cameras. So please do so if you're willing to. Yeah, it would be nicer just than to see only the names.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have one. Oh, hello. Welcome.
Hi. So I would like to make a question, but I don't know how to raise my hand.
Okay, but we see you, so you can talk. Can you introduce yourself very briefly, please?
Yes, hi, I'm Francesca. I wrote on the chat. I work for the city of Milan through an agency that supports the city administration, basically in public space design and master plan. So since I work with the administration, unfortunately I couldn't follow your lesson yesterday, but I know the works of your office, and so as I was saying, since I work with the administration, for us budget is a very important issue, and especially maintenance budget, because what the city has got to maintain all the green areas each year is a very low budget. So very often we really can't. We are very limited in the green space design for this issue, and also in general working with administration, experimenting and pushing the agenda, as you said, is very hard. So I would like to ask you if you can talk a bit more about the maintenance and care program that you do in order to lower maintenance budget for your designs. Thank you.
That's a good question. Well, first of all, I think it's universal what you are saying. It's not only to the city of Milan, it's all municipalities who are repeatedly saying the same. And from my point of view, it's not true. I mean, there is the money there is, so you need to be specific about it, but you also need to keep testing and trying something new. But I know it's hard. It's not easy in Copenhagen as well. Having that said, when we do projects with nature-based design, we always, and we know by now, we've been a practice for almost 30 years, that our projects is actually lower maintenance cost than it normally is. In a park where you cut the lawn 25 times a year, and so and you know all the details about that. But what I would suggest that you do is that you actually talk to the maintenance guys. Sometimes it's kind of two different divisions, even here in Copenhagen, which is a very small city in relation to Milan. We actually talked to the maintenance people of the city and asked them, is there anywhere, like a small spot, where we could test out that we maintain it less? So, go beyond that we don't have the money and we don't have the cost, go directly to the source and then start a dialogue. Because we are all, a bit in a comfort of doing what we did yesterday. And sometimes it's just about, asking and starting up a dialogue. The project I showed yesterday, Sønder Boulevard, it was actually a problem that the city of Copenhagen maintained it way too hard. So we had to sort of step in, and we did that without getting money for it. And we stepped in and said, well, let's maintain it like this. We only cut these grasses once a year, not 25 times a year. We do this type of, we test here that we just leave it and see what happens. So it kind of, looking at the urban spaces in cities as it is your own garden. So start in that in a small scale. Is that an answer? Because all cities that we have worked with are saying the same. I'm sorry about that, but that's how it is.
So, Francesca, was it a good answer for you? Do you have anything to...
Yeah, definitely. There's not enough dialogue with the director responsible for the maintenance. Normally, we talk with the, let's say, one step behind the green department. So definitely that could be a point. Also, apart from the green maintenance, we cleaning for them is an issue, since plants and like bushes tend to absorb garbage and the cleaning is more expensive than cleaning alone. So it's hard, but definitely if we could demonstrate that actually a different maintenance program can be cheaper with a better outcome in terms of design and biodiversity, that would be great. Yeah, we also need some specific how can I say specific skills and knowledge that we don't usually work with. So it's a network that has to be created. Yeah.
If I just may step in, for example, in my own practice, what I usually use, there's a few methods or guidelines for our scientific institutions, and they started to finally share information that are also cost related. So, for example, there's one book that is describing various types of flower beds, and they actually calculated how much does it cost to maintain it if it's flower bed like this, and how much does it cost if it's a flower bed like that, and how much does it cost if it's a meadow. And actually, I realized that this is a great tool for me to use for the mayors or for the clients, because they can see in the money how much this design will actually lower the expense of the maintenance. It does not always change the cost of the implantation, but it definitely changed the cost of the maintenance. So this is like from my own experience what I use. What is, on the other hand, different, and we discussed that heavily yesterday, is that perception of aesthetics. For example, in Czech Republic, we are slowly getting there. People are slowly accepting this urban wilderness that Ingo was talking about. But I mean, we are getting there, and I think that people start to understand that we really are in a climate crisis and that we have to change some tools. But what works best, at least here in Czech Republic, is to show them how much money they save. So that might be maybe something for you, that you can look for some institutions in Milan, if there was a research like that at the universities, or some botanical institutions or some plant specialist institutions that can have materials like that for you to have something in hand and use.
Yeah, definitely. That's very interesting as well. Yeah.
We also
money and time is always, it's the most used excuse for not doing change.
But actually,
it's never enough.
In Italy, the first excuse is law and responsibility and accountability.
Okay.
It's a very long topic.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have a question from the audience. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, that's fine. But I think, to some extent, I think you're completely right about the power of an example. And I would assume that the politicians of Milan would like to change, you know? Mm. What is the issues in your cities? Is it like air pollution? Is it like that people are not driving? Is it that you have too little parks? It's a beautiful city, by the way, but there is definitely areas where you can improve.
Yeah, and actually this is could be the right moment because the not the mayor but the political council just changed last week. There were elections and there is a new green department political responsible, so, and I think she could be very interested.
So now it's the best time to start.
Yeah.
We have a question from the audience here. So, Marek, I'm giving you the word, please. Can we hear you?
Yes, thank you. We started discussion about money, so I will maybe continue my question with that. Yesterday, Mette, you were showing the book Climate Adaptation and Urban Nature. We studied this book a few years ago when we visited Copenhagen. It was great inspiration for using the ecosystem services, and you were talking about the values. And yesterday I saw it in the presentation very briefly that it seemed that you stepped further with a evaluation of the ecosystem services, of perhaps showing in more detail how each project, what services it brings. Perhaps even maybe we saw some more exact numbers there. Could you a little bit reflect on that? How in last let's say 2 or 3 years, how if you went where you went further in studying this ecosystem services evaluations?
Yes, I mean we do that because we cannot help doing it. So we even do, baseline studies and projects where we are not paid for it, because we want to sort of be measured on both the development of biodiversity, but also in how the ecosystems perform. And of course, that's harder said than done. But we have a series of projects. On that specific project, we are measuring the biodiversity, both how it thrives, how it's living, and how it's getting older, but also how it's making habitat for new species. So we are doing both like field studies and desktop analysis and evaluation and assessment on that project. So it differs a little, but the ecosystem services, we have a series of, it's always, better to connect evidence with some kind of aesthetics or into a design. If it's only evidence, it's about, we could just like live in boxes and eat the same for breakfast every day. So you need to sort of put a little bit of magic into it. And for doing that, nature-based design is a really powerful tool.
It's if I can ask maybe a little bit more, because when we have visited the Copenhagen, I think there was some testing going on in terms of evaluating the projects from of course it let's say if there is a project running, it enhances some social values. These are quite hard to grasp in a way. But of course, it could save some money in terms of, let's say, saving money for other technical infrastructure projects, or it could prevent from flooding, etc., etc. So, did you went in your research somewhere this direction, that you are able to evaluate your projects in some more systematic and more exact way in terms of either costs or let's say some other values that they could be reflected in some numbers for politicians, that they love numbers, so that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, but we are doing that. There's a series of, it's called BioNet Gain if you talk about it on a city level, but also on a project level, and that's something that our biologists do actually by desktop, so on a table in a computer. So it's a desktop assessment. And then we always combine it with like field studies on the specific site. Regarding the social values and how that evolves over time, it's our anthropologists that does that. Mm-hmm. And it's a little bit the same, no? They are also making field studies, interviews, both quantitative and qualitative interviews, before, during, and after a construction, and then follow up. So it's, of course, when you talk about social values, you can talk about that now only 10% feels unsafe in walking in dark hours in an environment or in a neighborhood. But you can also do hardcore estimation on how many meals have been eaten in the area, how many new shops have opened or have they closed, and how many social events have taken place. So that kind of evidence is. But I think also sometimes it's about opening up for the dialogue, because we had a series of projects here in Copenhagen that was actually stopped by the citizens because they were demanding that the future development of a series of sites that had like very specific nature species that were scarce. So they were, red listed. I mean, the residents or the citizens of Copenhagen simply made a ring around it, so they had to stop the plan. So the power of people and the power of dialogue, I always believe in. It's in the relations between humans that a lot of the magic can happen, no? And a lot of the power lies in that. And that's also what I referred to yesterday. The power of SLA is the power of is our culture. It's how we work, and it's how we share, and how we sort of have each other's backs. That's being loyal, being sharing, being the power of we, like Sesame Street is always saying, no? The power of we club.
And do you have anthropologists in your team, in your office?
Yes.
Okay, wow, that's amazing actually. Because usually we just externally hire them, and usually there's no budget for them at all. I'm talking about Czech Republic now. So.
But it's not always easy. Yeah, so I'm not saying that we can always, but it's for us. It's again, as I also said yesterday, that it's about ensuring that the value proposition in our project, since it's always in a public accessible area, that we do interventions, that it's somehow followed and monitored in order to see the development, or negatively or positively.
I have actually one question. First I'll ask, is there anyone from the audience who would like to ask? I see that Philip turned on the camera, but not the microphone. Is there any question, guys, you would like to, or your input for the discussion? Okay, no, not yet. In Czech Republic, there's it's not a new tool, but it appeared just a few years ago, and that's dotace, jak se řekne? Funding, yeah, fundings for. So you get money to plant, let's say, trees, and actually cities started to get these funds, but these funds are very limited to what you can do. So on one hand, you get the money to, let's say, plant the trees, but you don't get the money for the maintenance. And city usually ask for this money so they can plant 1,000 trees, but then they don't put their own money for the maintenance. So these projects, sometimes they're successful, sometimes they are not. Is there such a mechanism in Denmark?
Yes.
Yes? And how does it work?
Such a mechanism. I must say that I don't really know.
Okay.
I don't really know how it works, but one reflection that I thought about is that we did the city of Copenhagen sold a piece of land where there was in the regulation plan there had to be a ramp from 0 to +7 to another roof, so a more, the soft trafficants, so it's pedestrians and bicyclists that could access in another route along a really heavy infrastructure. And only because the city sold the land with that regulation, one of the biggest banks in the Nordic countries actually chose to buy the land and make their headquarters. But if they wouldn't have had this, regulation in the local plan, then the access would not have been there. Mm-hmm. And in this ramp, it's called the SEB, you can see it on our website. And in this ramp, it's actually a roof of a parking lot, parking garden, a parking house. Mm-hmm. It's optimal for skaters. And how do you connect like skating and super high-end bank where you have to have like 1.5 million euros in order to be a client? I mean, I'm not at least in that category privately. But here, when we then investigated that and measured that if there's skaters, there's not graffiti painters. So it's cheaper to have the access for skaters and have like a thriving environment for skaters than it is to have for, a bank area that is a little bit closed during after 5 o'clock in the evening. So here the receptionist of this bank actually offers sodas every Thursday and Friday afternoon to the skaters because there's money to save, no? Basically, it's about the money. It's always about the money. But it's about, looking into another system, another way of the flow of money. Mm-hmm. And in that extent, there's so many different scales where you could that you could intervene in. I mean, the roundabout and the housing street, here people meet. They because it's nice, because it's a super change that they thrive in, and because they were part of actually doing a pilot on the vegetation, mm-hmm. then they relate to the project, mm-hmm. so they take care of it. So that's kind of how you differ between maintenance and everyday behavior. So that's also back to you, Franziska, no? That you can actually nudge by opening up the dialogue and talking with people. Then you can actually nudge a different behavior in the urban space.
I think having people involved is the goal, is the way to go, because then it's getting, I agree. At least in Czech Republic, it's getting a little bit better. But I see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I think that this conference is the evidence of that.
That's very nice. I also heard about a project in New York where the neighbors all the residents on Manhattan were offered like a learning program on trees. Mm-hmm. So by that learning, they you know, I think it was 1,000 people. By that learning, this is an oak tree. It's like 50 years old. It has been planted by this and this and that. This is a different species. This is another. It's a pine wood, and it was recently planted in order to do this and this and that. And so, as long as we start relating to nature, then we actually respond to it, but we also create empathy for the nature in our cities.
Yeah.
So sometimes you just have to start super small, no?
I think that, for example, in Prague, there's, and I'm not sure about my opinion on that, but there's a series of guerrilla gardening happening. So people are taking care of like small spots. It's sort of like pretty in a way. It's sort of like, sometimes it's really interesting. But yeah, and I think that that's definitely an evidence of people caring about their environment. And they're replacing these like small fences and stones around the trees, and they plant flowers there and other plants. They're creating like miniature gardens, which is, in some cases, yeah, just, it's interesting. I don't know how to describe that in a different term. So, another question or comment from Marek?
Yeah, if there is no questions from the audience, I want to make one comment to the small steps and changes. I'm really happy because I just received a message from the mayor of one city borough, Troja. I was yesterday showing in my presentation this ugly parking lot in front of the Troja castle. So we just he told me that they just had a deal about moving some part of this parking lot away, and we are preparing some small urban temporary changes with some chairs and exhibitions. So just a few minutes ago. So it's very nice. One of the small steps for the better environment, but. I wanted to maybe ask also a little bit. We started a discussion when we were preparing this conference, Mette, that if you could speak a little bit or evaluate. You said you were talking about the change of the profession of landscape architect in the Nordic countries in last let's say a decade or more. Could you a little bit reflect on that? It's super interesting for us because we are just in the beginning of that process. I hope.
I hope so too, and of course you are. If you want if you want the change to happen, it will happen with a little bit of hard work. It's a little bit a personal story, you know. I am trained and educated as an architect, a normal architect doing buildings and the built environment. So my first professional job was with Henning Larsen, and that's very much doing planning and looking into cities from a building perspective. So more structural and not so system oriented. And then I had two kids like super close, and then I thought, okay, I need a change. I had worked there for 8 years. I need to do something different. So I stopped and did my own practice for like a year and a half. And then I started, you know, building normal houses for families. And then I was just like, there must be a bigger picture. There must be something at stake here. And I also missed the very complex processes of working with cities. So then I looked into to that profession again, and then I must say that I knew very little about landscape architecture. I only worked with them, and, you know, basically they were, with the projects that I did, they were pimping or greening up the nice buildings, you know, so making green makeup around the buildings, and it was often very, very small part of the budget. and even that was depending on the housing, the building project. So if that differed a little bit, then all of a sudden we didn't have any money for the trees. So it was kind of, you know, I felt like, okay, there's something at stake here that we need to push forward. And then I approached SLA because they have already, they've already been in the world for like 15 years when I started here 10 years ago. And they had something that was really hard not to be curious about. Very radical, doing radical projects, doing projects that always differed from project to project. And in that, just by opening up and starting a dialogue with SLA at the moment, all of a sudden, you know, I was, you know, opening up my brain kind of. All of a sudden, I was like looking into a city in a different, just by going on my bike, I felt like super grateful about the trees that were there and how it changed over season. And 10 years ago, SLA was 90% of all we did was like a sub-consultant to a building architect. And today, that's only 20% of what we do. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's about. Of course, there's a lot of, you know, specifics to it. It's much more risk management. It's different to have like the entire contract and then have big engineer companies working under you. How do you sort of ensure and risk management a project like that and ensure the money flow and all that type of details? So what we did here at SLA is that we simply professionalized and learned internally how to do that. Mm-hmm. And then we were inspired by how other professions have done that. And then we were simply bold, I mean super bold, and saying, we want the same hourly rate as the building architect. Otherwise we say no. Mm-hmm. And sometimes saying no is actually no to every, what you do every day is saying yes to something different. But of course, you have to have the guts for it. And it's easier said than done, but and it's not me as one person. We were a group of people who did that and who were aware of that if we should have the full value of nature and landscape and blue-green infrastructure in cities, it needs to have a mandate. It needs to have a power. It needs to have a, you know, one voice. So we just started, and that's, yeah, back to, I'm maybe repeating myself, we started the dialogue saying, this is not fair. We did this park and, I mean, 2 million were like taken away from our budget after detailed design. And how do you expect us to actually make a success? And it's such a small sum of money of the total sum of a project, but it has so much effect. Mm. And then starting, you know, just by talking about real estate value, how is it you choose a house? That's always related about how it is located and what the surroundings are about. So, you know, starting by super banal and bold thoughts and just step by step. Mm. But of course, being aware of, you know, the formal side of it as well. How do you make a contract? How do you see to risk management? How do you make a project log? How do you process? How do you design a process that is safe and sound? And then one thing that is a selling point is that we always are consistent about the people who start the project, are also the people ending a project. So it's very rarely that we shift, you know, in the organization, even though we are as many as we are, that we shift in a design process. Mm-hmm. People. So that in that order, you actually are able to create trust. Mm-hmm. And that's also what it's all about. No?
And also responsibility, right? For those people.
True.
Yeah. I was once working on a project where the budget for the bathrooms were larger than the budget for landscape. The argument and the argument from the manager was that the shower heads are really expensive. Like, I'm not kidding. He said that the shower heads are, and it's important to have this high quality of the shower heads, because yeah, because people will buy those apartments based on the design and the quality of the bathrooms, and I was like, yeah. But it was, I mean, I would know what to tell him today. That was years ago. But it also it happened.
That's a good story.
Hard to believe, yeah. But yes.
Maybe if I could add one more. Sorry to taking the word again. And do you it's an interesting personal story, because I'm also an architect, even though I'm working with landscape projects and conceptions and strategies at the moment. But just if from your side, if you are looking to in Denmark, let's say, or in Copenhagen, what landscape architects did 10 years ago, what they do now, talking about maybe also the complexity of the projects, talking about interdisciplinary cooperations, talking about maybe not only about the size of the projects, but the approach that the landscape architecture is going. So how, if you could maybe try to reflect a little bit from your side, how this happened? What was the motor? What was the when it started to happen? Was it suddenly, or was it just right away at some crucial point that something changed? And
no, I cannot answer that. I mean, working interdisciplinary is not a common thing amongst landscape architects. So there's still many offices and studios here in Denmark and Nordic countries who does like what we used to do. And we also do those projects, but it's just so much less because we really, invested in being interdisciplinary, but also invested in doing large-scale planning from nature or from the landscape. A well-known Danish landscape architect, he said that first there was the landscape, then there is the city, and then comes the building. So it's kind of in that order, and somehow it makes super much sense, no? And then of course when a heavy rain hits a city and it's super damaged and paralyzed, or if there's an extreme drought during a summer, or there's like a lot of snow or winds and hurricanes and so forth, then there's work for landscape architects, because that's in the environment that we work in.
Exactly.
I mean, it's much harder, but sometimes it's, telling the story pretty banal, but people understand it.
If I can comment on that.
And it's kind of to take that position. Yeah. You will never be given the position. You have to demand it.
Yeah. If I can comment on that, I did my academic research on the landscape architecture in Czech Republic, and I was asking the practitioners, and then I built up a theory. But what I want to say is that one of the results of the research was that landscape architects are happy and satisfied if they can present themselves with what is called good results. And I think that's exactly what we saw through whole of this conference, that we were presenting good results that I believe can naturally change the situation, because the politicians will see that they need it, the mayors will see that they need it, and I personally think that that's one of the most powerful tools we have to build our profession upon these good results that we can present and show how valuable and good they are. It it takes a long time because landscape is something that takes time to mature. It's not like with the building that you build it, you cut the rope, you pop up the champagne, and it's done. With landscape, it's totally opposite. It takes years and years. So I know it takes time, but I really personally believe that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And Marek, I can see that the situation changed a lot in Czech Republic. For example, for last 10 years, it really changed a lot, although it's not as mature as maybe in the Western countries, but it is changing, and it is thanks to all of us, all of our colleagues that are practicing landscape architects and that do these good projects and present these good results. And I really believe that's the only tool, except the money situation. I think this is one of the only tools that we have. We have to show that we are important. And once the other planning professions understand how important part of the team we are, then, and they already do understand it, and they seek for us. The problem here is that we still don't have enough well-trained landscape architects that can provide these services. It's very, very complex services, but we are also getting there. So I believe that the situation is changing here as well. That's just like my comment on.
But also, you must have experienced during COVID that people seek nature, also in cities.
Yeah, yeah.
And they even have made, lies about seeing dolphins in Canal Grande in Venice. They even make lies about it, no? So it's kind of, that's an opportunity. And that here in Denmark, people have the explosion of first-time visitors in national parks, but also in forests and urban spaces, urban parks have exploded. Yeah. So it's kind of overused. So there is a demand, there is a move right now, and then also research, but just on the internet. How is the IPBES? How are they the Skupta report made from? Have you heard about that? The British Finance Ministry of Finance in 2019 demanded a report on biodiversity globally and how can we actually act upon it. It's called the Skupta. I'll do it on the. But that was recently launched. So it's about using the arguments that are already there in order to push the agenda for this profession.
Yeah, well, what I heard that the biodiversity crisis is communicated 12 times less than the climate crisis. That we sort of all understand what the climate crisis is, but biodiversity crisis is not communicated as much. And what really surprised me at this conference is that almost every presenter was talking about it. And we didn't ask for it, it just happened. So yeah, it's there, I guess.
Yeah. Well, look into the Dasgupta report. I mean, I must say that the old empire does have, it has like a solidness of seeking knowledge, and they also were, it was also the Ministry of Finance who did the Stern report. So you can, I mean, yeah, now it's already there in the chat. But look into it. I mean, it was heavily published, and then the IPBES had this biodiversity day, and there's so many things that you can add to. And I believe that the climate crisis, the climate action, is actually a consequence of the biosphere's, the loss of biodiversity.
So, do we have any maybe last questions from the audience, or? I think we can just wrap this up. I think it was a very fruitful conversation that we had, and I'm very glad, Mette, that you spent your time with us. It was
well, thank you very much. I really enjoyed this format as well. I would have hoped that more had had asked questions, but you did good questions, and I hope the rest of you enjoyed it. But it's so nice to meet you like this, and hopefully we'll meet
I hope
someday.
we'll meet in person one day.
Yes.
Yeah, this format was a bit challenging, and I understand that people are not willing to be that active, but we'll respect that, and hopefully in 2 years we'll meet in person at the other next Landscapes conference. So Mette, thank you once again. Francesca, thank you for joining us, being the brave one, and I hope that
thank you for organizing.
And I hope that you got some answers that you were looking for. So I would like to end this workshop and also end this conference. Thank you all once again, and I hope to see you in next years. Bye.